Composting is a method of making soil. We can take scraps from the kitchen, such as vegetable peels and old pieces of fruit, rotten fruit, and we can mix that with leaves and other organic material, and it turns back into soil through the process of decomposition. People compost because the soil that you create by composting is rich in nutrients and organic matter that help fertilize your garden. It's a free source of fertilizer. It also creates a really great texture for your soil that helps it retain moisture and leads to very healthy plants. The process of composting is essentially decomposition. The organic matter, your fruit and vegetable scraps, and the leaves are broken down by organisms that occur naturally in soil in our natural environment. Bacteria and fungi are really big decomposers. They can break down large pieces. You think about, you might put a piece of rotten fruit into your compost, it's already got fungus in it. So there you go, you're starting that decomposition process, that breakdown. There are different levels of decomposition. You have primary consumers, you have different insects, bugs, worms that all help with that decomposition process, and they break it down further. Over time, it turns from what looked like your garbage, your kitchen scraps, into soil. There's a range of time for how long the composting process takes. If you keep your pile moist and hot, it can happen pretty quickly, especially in the summer in Alabama. You might have a finished compost in, say, 2 to 3 months. In the winter, because the temperature is lower, it might take you longer. It might take you 6 months to have a finished compost. The more frequently you turn the compost, the faster your compost is going to become finished. That decomposition process requires oxygen, so it's an aerobic process. If you have a stinky compost pile, that means you have anaerobic processes happening. That means it's not having oxygen and you're not turning your compost often enough. This is a hugelkultur bed. This is a method of composting in place. Over time, the logs buried in this bed will decompose slowly. And what happens is they turn into fine, moist, sponge-like material, and they help retain moisture in your bed. Insects can help break down large pieces of compost. They might eat it, but say a fly larva, there's certain type of fly called soldier flies that are important in composting. They indicate a healthy compost pile. They can help break down the material further. We would expect to see things like roly-polies, isopods, is their scientific name. Worms are really great to have in your compost. They break down the materials. They're great decomposers. We might see flies. Some flies would be good, some flies might be bad. You want the kind that are helping with the decomposition process. You want to keep meat and cheeses out of your compost pile. If you have fats in your pile, you're going to get some flies that are not so good. You might also see things like ants. Occasionally you might have roaches, bees, wasps. Those are things that are less desirable to have in your compost pile. You're probably not getting the decomposition going enough if you have those organisms. You want your compost pile to have lots of oxygen and moisture. Those are things that help it decompose. You want heat in your compost pile. So if you see some of those organisms like ants and centipedes and bees, you want to take more care with your compost to keep it moist and hot and turn it over so that it has oxygen, and then you won't see those critters. This is a large pile of finished compost. You can still make out a few pieces of leaves, but for the most part, this looks a lot like garden soil that you would buy at Home Depot or Lowe's or another garden supply store. This pile is probably about a year old at this point. Look at our huge leaf pile! This is our leaf pile. These leaves come from the University of Alabama quad. In the fall, we have lots of leaves that fall from deciduous trees on the quad. Many of them are oak trees. And those leaves are collected by our grounds crew, and the grounds crew brings them and drops them off here so we can use them throughout the year. We have to have a balance in our compost between carbon and nitrogen. The organisms, the decomposers that make compost happen need a balanced diet. So they need enough carbon and enough nitrogen, carbon from the leaves and nitrogen from the food scraps, in order to make soil. Yes, our composting program, it really starts with the university. We get leaves from campus in the fall, and throughout the year, we get fruit and vegetable scraps from the dining hall. And we combine those leaves with the fruit and vegetable scraps, and we're able to create compost with the right mixture. One caveat to getting our leaves from campus, these leaves come mainly from the quad, and this is fall. We end up with little pieces of crimson and white plastic in our compost. It doesn't really hurt anything in the garden, and sometimes we pick it out, sometimes we don't. But the little side note to our UA compost, I guess you know it's University of Alabama compost if it has shaker pieces in it. So with finished compost, we're able to use this on the community garden. We use the community garden as a place for our students to learn about gardening. We have community members that also help with the garden, and the produce that is harvested is donated to the local food bank. Part field hand, part gardener.
All Arboretum.
All Arboretum. The forest and the garden.